Hey, I am at a new place right now, and I am back. And in fact, I was originally at a new place 2 days ago, but I'm in a new place right now. This is the sixth place I have stayed at in Los Angeles. So, anyways, today I'm going to be doing an album review on the new Sílvia Pérez Cruz album, Toda La Vida un día. So this album is from Spanish folk singer-songwriter Sílvia Pérez Cruz, and this is she's been making music for a while already. And this is her latest album, and I guess it popped on the radio music charts for a little bit and it got my attention, so I decided to listen to it. And it's actually a really interesting album. This album has 21 tracks and it is 1 hour and 9 minutes long. This album is separated into 5 movements, and it's actually a very ambitious concept album. Musically, I don't think this is that great or anything, and especially in comparison with other contemporary artists like Natalia Lafourcade as well as Silvia Estrella. I believe that's her name, right? So, but still, this album is really worth discussing in my opinion because it is actually really interesting. So we have the first movement, La Flor, which means the flower, and the track titles on this album, half of the titles are in Catalan, which is like a Spanish dialect, and my laptop just crashed. Again, what's so interesting about the song titles of this album is that half of the album are in Catalan, which is a northern dialect of Spanish, and so some of the words here I don't even know necessarily what do they mean, but I did some Google translating. The album opener is called El no vol que el mon s'acabi, which means he doesn't want the world to end. And on this track, we get some sweet strings, finger-picked guitars, and soft feathery vocals. That's pretty much your formula flamenco slash Spanish folk, and it works pretty well. It's pretty good. It has some beautiful harmonies at a lot of points. It reminds me of Radiohead's Faust ARP because of the mystifying strings. And then afterwards we have the track La Flor, which has the rustic, weepy strings, and these strings become really cinematic when they rise and swell throughout the entire track. Lyrically, we also get really theatrical on this track. Then we have Els Dracs busquen l'abril, which means the dragons are looking for abril. Once again, you get the finger-picked guitars, baroque strings, arrangements. This whole track gives off a very fantastical feel to it, especially with the track titles, which is a pretty interesting way to start off movement 1 because the later movements in the album are nowhere near as fantastical as movement 1. And then finally, the movement ends off with Planetes y Orenetes, which means planets and swallows. This track really reminds me of Amnesiac era Radiohead, with the hums and the calming but off-tune keyboards. And then on top of that, you get these bossa nova shakes. And yeah, while movement 1 starts off really strong, I don't think this particular track is that great or anything because it transitions to movement 2, which goes for a more experimental approach. Structurally, the tracks in this movement are a little bit less impressive. And yeah, I really enjoy the experimentation, but the experimentation just didn't really pay off completely. The opening track for this movement is called La Inmensidad, which means the immensity. So the opener is Aterrados. Yeah, it's a reverby ballad with some really wild background screams. Did it really pay off? I don't think so. It sounds interesting for sure, but it's definitely not the kind of track that I would go on and revisit. And there's nothing all that ingenious about the creative choices made in this song anyways. Then we have the track Sin, which means without. It's a stripped back, clarinet backed ballad. It's a very interesting choice of instruments. I love the usage of woodwinds in ballads. They're really good, especially oboes and clarinets. But this track, structurally and songwriting wise, is also kind of by the numbers. Following that, we have Sucio, which sounds like a leftover recording, sounds like a demo. It's very muffled. The recording is very low quality. It sounds like it's being recorded with a phone. It's got some horns and some pianos, but overall the recording just makes this track sound like a leftover. If anything, afterwards we have the track El Poeta es la fingidor, which means the poet is a pretender, with the layered vocals that are almost glitchy and auto-tuned, and then we get these meandering horns in the back. Once again, the experimentation didn't really pay off all that much. I think the track, songwriting wise, just isn't as strong, but the movement did have a very strong finish with Salir Distinto, which means leave different, and it's an 8-minute long track with tons of guest features, and they all give this dramatic theatrical vocal performance, like they're all on a stage play or something. And then near the end of the track, it becomes really fiery with the flamenco claps and the guitars, and overall it is a really interesting sounding send-off to this movement. Following that, we have movement number 3, Mi Jardín, which means my garden, and this movement starts off with Aterados. I don't know what the hell's wrong with my voice, and the last couple of weeks it just takes so much great effort for me to sound good, and my voice is always very raspy. So this track, Aterados, Coro Italiano, is just an okay intro track. I think they sang in Italian, so that's pretty cool. Ayuda Martin is a pretty duet track with nothing but vocals and guitars, and it's actually really sweet and lovely. Mi última canción triste means my final sad song, and it features none other than Natalia Lafourcade. Both Sílvia and Natalia have amazing vocal chemistry on this track, and this track is so stripped back it's almost a cappella, so it's pretty good. Finally, we have the darkest movements on the album, that is movement 4, El Peso. We have the title track for the album, and it is a mystifying ballad with some rusty, muffly strings at the end, which sounds very strange. And then we have Tots els finals del món, which means all the end of the world. And on this track, Sílvia Pérez Cruz delivers some really teary-eyed emotional performances, and you also get these devastating pianos and strings. Em moro means I die, and that is the next track, which is a stripped-back vocal duet track. Sounds like a funeral song, if that's a thing. Conceptually, it's very interesting. It seems like whatever the main character is on this album has freaking died. So, thus this movement. And the movement end off with 21 de Primavera, which is another duet track, this time a lot less dramatic, and you get these guitar slaps. And finally, movement 5 is Renacimiento, which means rebirth. So I guess the main character has died, and now they have reborn. They are reborn, and reborn into something else. Maybe a child, maybe a baby, or something else. And yeah, this movement is really interesting. We have a church organ intro, and then we have the track Estrella e Raiz, which has a real rhythm to it with guitar strings slashing sounds and guitar slaps. And we have Nombrar es imposible, which means naming is impossible, which I guess my speculation is naming a child. And this track has a strange combination of flutes and echoey vocal effects on top of the soft sequence beats, and then at the end we have this spoken word passage, and overall the track just sounds like a very strange rebirth and restructure of Sílvia Pérez Cruz's style, because the first half of the album is so rustic and raw. This time it's so much more like electronic and synthesized. Then we have El Teu Nom, which means your name, with the xylophones and the haunting choir vocals. And the choir vocals continue on with the final track of the album, Mon, which means world. And it's a heavenly choir vocal outro track where you really feel like the character is reborn. It's really heavenly, it's crazy, and it almost sounds like a track off of a Swans album, like A Piece of the Sky or something. So it's actually really crazy that some random Spanish folk album could have such an ambitious concept. It's very clear that she's trying to say something about death and life and rebirth and everything, and that's really cool. I love the experimentation as well. Songwriting wise, it still has a lot to be desired, and I wish the production could be better on some of the tracks, but overall it is really interesting. I'm giving this album a strong 7 out of 10. So if you listen to this album, comments below, let me know, subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching.